Story lovers, you arrived at Luxury Tales, where hidden empires collide with forbidden love and destiny strikes without warning. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because tonight's story is raw, unpredictable, and drenched in secrets money can't hide. Now sit back. Luxury Tales unfolds. Cynthia Morgan woke before dawn in her cramped apartment, the ceiling fan rattling above her like a warning she could never silence. Bills were stacked neatly beside her mattress, rent overdue, electricity hanging by a thread, and her younger brother's school fees circled in red ink. She worked as a delivery rider for a logistics company that paid per job. No mercy for lateness or mistakes. Her motorcycle, old and temperamental, coughed as she started it, but Cynthia whispered encouragement to it the way she did to herself. She dreamed of stability, nothing extravagant, just a life where panic didn't wake her first every morning. That morning, her phone buzzed with final warning from her supervisor. One more failed delivery, and she was done. The order was urgent, the route unfamiliar, the sky threatening rain. Cynthia tightened her helmet, her jaw set with determination. She wasn't reckless by nature, but desperation has its own speed. As traffic thickened and horns screamed, Cynthia weaved carefully yet urgently, unaware that this single delivery would dismantle the fragile balance of her life and rebuild it into something she never imagined. The road was slick when it happened. A sudden stop ahead, a split second of hesitation, and Cynthia's motorcycle skidded despite her grip tightening on the brakes. The impact was loud, metal against luxury. She hit the ground hard, pain blooming in her shoulder as the world froze around her. When she looked up, her heart sank. The car she'd hit was flawless black, expensive beyond comprehension, its front now scarred because of her mistake. A crowd gathered instantly, murmurs slicing into her already racing thoughts. Then the driver's door opened, and Kingsley Reed stepped out. Calm, immaculate, powerful. Cynthia recognized him immediately. His face had appeared on business magazines, news screens, billboards. A CEO known for ruthless efficiency. Her hands trembled as she stood, apologizing through tears, already calculating numbers she could never afford. She expected shouting, threats, humiliation. Instead, Kingsley studied her silently, his gaze sharp but unreadable, as rain began to fall, washing the street, but not the fear knotting in her chest. Kingsley Reed listened as his driver spoke, as onlookers whispered, as Cynthia apologized repeatedly. He noticed details others ignored, the way she never denied fault, the way her eyes held fear but not entitlement, the way she stood straight even when the world pressed down on her. He waved off the crowd with a single gesture, his authority unquestioned, then asked Cynthia to step aside with him. When he spoke, his voice was even. No accusations, no threats. He asked her name, her job, why she'd been rushing. Cynthia answered honestly, her words tumbling over each other. Kingsley glanced at the damaged car, already aware the repair would cost more than her yearly income. He saw her brace herself for punishment. Instead, he said something that stunned everyone. This could be settled privately. No police. No shouting, just a conversation. Cynthia didn't understand yet, but her life had already veered sharply off its familiar path. At a quiet cafe later that day, Cynthia sat across from Kingsley, clutching a cup of untouched tea. The repair estimate sat between them like a death sentence. Her chest tightened as the numbers registered. She offered everything, her salary, her bike, even years of repayment, but knew it wasn't enough. Losing her job was inevitable now. Losing hope felt close behind. Kingsley leaned back, observing her carefully. He wasn't a man accustomed to chaos, yet Cynthia's life was exactly that, raw, unstable, honest. He proposed an alternative. She would work at his estate until the debt was cleared. Housing, meals, a structured role. It wasn't charity. He made clear it was repayment. Cynthia recoiled at first, pride burning, fear louder. But the math was merciless. Survival demanded compromise. With shaking hands and lowered eyes, she agreed, unaware she was stepping into a world where every rule she knew would be tested. Cynthia arrived at the Reed estate 2 days later, carrying a single worn suitcase. The gates alone intimidated her, towering and silent, as if guarding secrets. Inside, everything gleamed, floors polished to mirrors, chandeliers hanging like frozen stars. She felt small, out of place, her delivery uniform exchanged for borrowed staff, clothing that didn't quite fit. She was introduced to the household staff, most of whom looked at her with open curiosity or thinly veiled disdain. Then Esther appeared, tall, composed, her authority unquestioned. As head housekeeper, Esther ran the estate with rigid discipline. Her eyes narrowed the moment she saw Cynthia. The rules were laid out sharply, no mistakes, no familiarity, no expectations beyond obedience. Cynthia nodded, absorbing every word, hiding her fear behind quiet resolve. This wasn't just work. It was survival under scrutiny. The days that followed were brutal. Cynthia woke before sunrise and slept long after her body begged for rest. She scrubbed floors, carried loads heavier than herself, learned the estate's routines through trial and error. Esther corrected her constantly, sometimes unnecessarily, her tone cold and cutting. Other staff followed Esther's lead, keeping their distance, whispering when Cynthia passed. Yet Cynthia endured. She found comfort in small victories, perfectly folded linens, gardens tended at dawn, silent moments of pride when tasks were completed without correction. She refused to beg or complain. Kingsley noticed this from afar, though he said nothing. From his office windows and security reports, he saw her persistence. Where others broke or became bitter, Cynthia simply worked. That quiet strength stirred something unfamiliar in him, unsettling in its simplicity. One afternoon, a power failure disrupted the estate's operations during an important business call Kingsley was hosting. Staff scrambled, panic rising. Cynthia, assigned to maintenance support that day, acted instinctively, guiding electricians, calming staff, ensuring guests were relocated smoothly. She moved without seeking approval, focused only on solving the problem. When power was restored, Kingsley asked who had coordinated the response. Esther hesitated before mentioning Cynthia. Later, Kingsley called Cynthia to his office, not to reprimand, but to thank her. The moment was brief, professional, yet deeply affecting. Cynthia left shaken, unsure why his acknowledgement meant so much. Kingsley, left alone, replayed the interaction in his mind. For the first time in years, someone had impressed him without trying to. Their paths crossed more often after that. Kingsley asked small questions about her background, her work, her opinions. Cynthia answered cautiously, aware of the gulf between them. She spoke of responsibility, of wanting more from life than survival, of dignity. Kingsley listened, intrigued by her clarity and refusal to flatter him. Esther noticed a shift immediately. She began assigning Cynthia the hardest tasks, isolating her from others, reminding her subtly of her place. Cynthia felt the pressure but said nothing. At night, she wrote letters she never sent, grounding herself in words. Kingsley, meanwhile, found himself looking forward to their brief exchanges, unsettled by how easily Cynthia's presence cut through the noise of his carefully controlled world. The invitation came unexpectedly. Kingsley requested Cynthia's presence at a small formal dinner hosted at the estate, citing practical reasons, staff shortage, trust. The room fell silent when Cynthia entered that evening, dressed modestly but neatly. Conversations paused. Eyes judged. Esther watched from a distance, displeasure thinly veiled. Throughout the dinner, Kingsley treated Cynthia with quiet respect, engaging her in conversation, valuing her thoughts. The shift was undeniable. Cynthia felt exposed, torn between gratitude and fear. She didn't belong here. Every instinct told her. Yet when Kingsley looked at her, she felt seen, not as a maid, not as a debtor, but as a person. That realization frightened her more than poverty ever had. Whispers followed. Staff speculated, resentment brewed, and the atmosphere thickened with tension. Cynthia retreated inward, focusing on her duties, while Kingsley found himself increasingly protective of her space, her dignity, her peace. They shared longer conversations now about ambition, loneliness, responsibility. Neither named what was forming between them, but both felt its weight. One evening, Cynthia stood alone in the estate gardens, watching city lights in the distance, wondering how a single accident had carried her so far from herself. Kingsley joined her quietly. No declarations, no promises, just silence shared. In that stillness, something irrevocable settled between them. Neither knew yet the cost it would demand, but both sensed there was no turning back. The shift in the estate became impossible to ignore. Staff members lowered their voices when Cynthia passed, conversations dissolving into sharp silence. Esther's control tightened. Schedules changed without warning. Tasks doubled, mistakes exaggerated. Cynthia absorbed it all quietly, but the pressure seeped into her bones. She began questioning herself, wondering if resilience alone was enough to survive a world that constantly reminded her she didn't belong. Kingsley sensed the strain. He noticed Cynthia's fatigue, the way her shoulders stiffened whenever Esther entered a room. One evening, he asked her to join him briefly in the library under the pretense of reorganizing documents. The conversation drifted beyond work, to values, to loneliness at the top, to the weight of expectations. Cynthia spoke carefully, but honestly. Kingsley realized then that her strength wasn't survival, it was integrity, and that realization unsettled him deeply. The first article appeared online without warning. A blurred photo, a misleading headline. Cynthia's name wasn't mentioned, but the implication was clear. Staff circulated the news in hushed excitement. Esther pretended neutrality while quietly feeding the fire, ensuring rumors grew sharper and crueler. Cynthia felt exposed, stripped of privacy she never knew she had. Kingsley confronted the media team immediately, furious but controlled. Yet damage had already been done. Cynthia overheard staff mocking her intentions, questioning her morality. That night, she cried silently into her pillow, ashamed not of who she was, but how easily others defined her. Kingsley stood at his window long after midnight, realizing power could not shield the one thing he was beginning to value most. Pressure arrived from every direction. Business partners questioned Kingsley's judgment. Sponsors hinted at discomfort. Cynthia noticed a shift in his schedule, longer meetings, sharper tension. She began withdrawing, speaking less, avoiding eye contact. Her presence now felt like a liability, not a bond. Esther seized a moment. In carefully chosen words, she reminded Cynthia of the gap between her world and Kingsley's. She spoke of legacy, of appearances, of sacrifices people like Cynthia were expected to make. The words lodged painfully deep. Cynthia began packing small items quietly, preparing herself for a choice she hadn't yet admitted she was making. The board meeting was swift and brutal. Kingsley sat through polite threats masked as concern. The ultimatum was simple, and the relationship or risk losing everything he had built. He left the room outwardly composed, inwardly shaken. For the first time, success felt hollow. Cynthia sensed a storm without being told. She watched Kingsley from afar, saw the weight he carried, and made a decision rooted in love rather than fear. That night, she wrote a letter she would never sign, folded it carefully, and placed it where only she would know it had existed. Before dawn, she left the estate quietly, carrying nothing but resolve. Her disappearance fractured Kingsley's world. He searched the estate, demanded answers, ignored meetings. Esther claimed ignorance, her expression unreadable. When Kingsley realized Cynthia had chosen to leave without confrontation, without blame, the truth hit him hardest. She had sacrificed herself for him. Weeks passed. Kingsley unraveled. The company continued, but his heart wasn't in it. He delegated authority, canceled appearances, and began searching on his own, not as a CEO, as a man who had finally understood what he stood to lose. Cynthia started again in a quiet town, far removed from scrutiny. She worked at a small cafe, earning modest wages, rebuilding her sense of self piece by piece. No luxury, no judgment, just routine and honesty. She found peace in simplicity, though nights were harder. Love didn't disappear just because she chose distance. She avoided news, but occasionally Kingsley's name appeared anyway. Each mention stung. She reminded herself why she left. Love, to her, meant protection, even from herself. Still, a part of her wondered if choosing absence had truly been strength. Kingsley found her by accident, or fate. He recognized her laugh before he saw her face. The cafe fell silent as he stepped inside, his presence unmistakable even without power behind it. Cynthia froze, her heart racing, emotions colliding. They spoke outside. No accusations, no anger. Kingsley told her everything, the bored, the emptiness, the choice he was prepared to make. Cynthia listened, tears forming, her defenses crumbling under sincerity. He didn't beg. He offered equality, partnership, choice. Returning wasn't immediate. Cynthia needed certainty, not promises. Kingsley proved it not with words, but action. He publicly acknowledged their relationship, stepped down temporarily, and challenged the board's authority. The world reacted with shock, criticism, admiration. Cynthia watched from a distance, understanding finally that she wasn't a burden. she was his strength. When she returned to him, it wasn't as a maid or a secret, but as a woman standing on her own worth. The board backed down under public pressure and internal restructuring. Esther resigned quietly. Her influence dissolved. The estate felt lighter, freer. Cynthia moved through it differently now, confident, respected. Kingsley rebuilt not just his company, but its values. They planned a future deliberately, intentionally. Love no longer felt fragile. It felt chosen. Their wedding was intimate yet powerful. No spectacle, just truth. Cynthia stood radiant, not because of wealth, but because she had survived without losing herself. Kingsley looked at her, knowing success meant nothing without love. Together, they represented new beginnings, not defined by class, scandal, or fear, but by resilience, choice, and devotion. Their story didn't end with wealth or victory. It began with equality. I'm glad you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to follow, share, and comment your thought about the story. See you in the next story.